Welcome in. This is Dynasty Mode, the unofficial EA Sports college football game podcast. Archie Shea is my name. That is Dimitri Ravanas. Dimitri, shut it. Because today, I want you to save all of your energy for paying tribute, an homage, if you will, to the only time I think I'm ever going to use this phrase, the GOAT. Of all NCAA football video games from EA Sports, entitled simply NCAA 06.
This might surprise you. I don't think this is the GOAT. However, I would not be surprised at all if for people that were buying the game and playing and experiencing in real time, I would not be surprised at all if this is the one that made people fall in love with it. And made people, like, it certainly is the one for me that gave it that kind of undying loyalty of, literally, Archie, I think after this game came out, I think I bought Madden one more time because this was all I needed in the football world.
Well, let me tell you this. I'm about to make a very firm case for you why it's the GOAT. I believe a lot of people watching this right now believe this is the GOAT in this franchise.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people listening in the old podcast realm think this is the GOAT of all the NCAA video games. And there is a very, very good case why to be made. Now, Dimitri?
Yes.
Let us begin at the beginning.
Before you jump in, just to sort of your point about there is a case to be made. It all, I think, begins with our buddy Owen Good's description of this was sort of the bad boy of the NCAA franchise.
Yes, it was. It was the bad boy member of the boy band of the NCAA football.
The A.J. McClain, if you will.
You know, I haven't heard it described quite that way. I'm not against it. I'm not against it.
It kind of lines up.
Let me take you to a very, very hot Monday morning. July 11th.
Okay.
2005. NCAA 06 goes on sale.
Never
and
forget.
The world of college football video games was never the same. Quite literally, by the way. There is a lot that we're going to talk about this game that was a major, major upgrade in the series.
So Dynasty Mode had existed in the series before, but it didn't exist the way you know it now until 06.
Believe me, I am referring to a bunch of notes here as I show you on the video.
I assume that entire notebook is just for 06. You have one for each game in the series.
I do. The one for Bill Walsh football is a little thinner.
Sure.
But it definitely got one. I've been working on it for every game. You're not wrong, by the way. I do have sections of the internet that I have saved. Every time I find a tidbit that I had forgotten about or I sort of rediscovered, it goes in a little note for it when we talk about other video games going on in the future. Like, I love the series, man.
I'm with you.
So, NCAA 06 comes out, obviously, in the summer of 2005. And for me personally, that's the year I'm going to college. That's the summer of me going into college. So, there is a special place in my heart for it.
Wow, you went to college 2 years after I graduated.
Don't you feel young?
Every day, the world reminds me, Archie, that I am slowly becoming less and less relevant to the kids.
Well, to be fair, I dropped out of high school twice my freshman year, so there's not as much of a gap there, but between you and I as you would like to think.
Archie, dropping out twice in 1 year implies you learned your lesson and went back.
I did eventually learn some lessons.
Sure. Can I ask you, like, not to go on a tangent, but what is the process of dropping out? Do you just not go, or do you have to formally declare you drop out?
Well, in the state of Alabama, at the time, you had to go to the front office and say, I would like to withdraw from, at the time, New Hope High School.
Sure.
And then when I moved, I had to say that I want to withdraw from Buckhorn High School.
Mm-hmm.
So once I did that, they were like, well, that's dumb, but okay. You're allowed to once you reach the age of, I think, 16. I think it's 15, actually. 15 or 16. I'm trying to remember because I was very cognizant of that time. I just wanted to be gone.
There were a lot of the longer we know each other, the more we talk to each other about stuff not related to NCAA football, the more I learned that there were a few zigs where if you had zagged, Archie Shea is just a pure dirtbag.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Trust me, there's some bad acorns underneath this oak. Okay, so, and they're not far from the roots. Okay, so this game comes out obviously in 2006 for the year, because in 2005 for the game 2006. And we talked about on a previous episode of this podcast that there are a couple of years where EA Sports did a significant investment of time, resources into the football game itself.
It's
one of those
like
would not be 07, by the way. Like they ride the coattails a little bit here for a while. But this 06 video game was one of the first, I think it was the second one actually, but it was one of the first major overhauls of a couple of features in the game and of the game itself. And I'm excited to get to talk to some of those with you right now.
So I think one of the reasons that 06 required, or that we got such an overhaul, first of all, I think your characterization of they would do these major overhauls of the game, I can't say this for sure, right? This is just a suspicion I have. Every so often, they would put out a game where they could not avoid the market backlash. And I think NCAA 05 was one of those. NCAA 05 played a lot slower than other games, and it was also the introduction of the momentum meter. Or I guess I should say it was the game where the momentum meter could make it impossible for you to do anything in that game if you were losing.
There is a very definite, and I've gone back in the last few weeks and noticed on a very legal to own PS2 emulator that the way 2005 plays versus the way the 2006 game plays, very different.
2005, I remember this distinctly. It played so slow that I took it back to the store. And like knew I was going to be taking a hit for the resale thing, but I was like, I don't want this. I'm never going to play this game.
Yeah, let me at least get the $1.18 back.
Yeah, exactly. Right exactly.
Like I will go buy some gum on the way home.
Exactly. And that's a bummer because 04, which is the one with Carson Palmer on the cover, is really strong. Like 02, 03, 04 were really strong games. And that's why it is sort of like, I'm just trying to put this into context for our younger listeners that may be anticipating the game coming back, maybe started playing, with the 06 version. 05 was such a departure in quality that it necessitated the leaps forward that were in 06.
Before we get straight to that, I do want to mention just this tidbit at the very beginning that does need to be mentioned, and then we'll get into all the gameplay aspects of it. 06 was the first game in the series that did not feature a recently moving on to the NFL or to other parts of their life football player. This was Desmond Howard on the cover. Desmond Howard that had not played college football for 15 years at the time, I think 14 years, right? 15 years at the time. I think you play Michigan won the Heisman, 91? I think, 90, is that right?
Yeah, I think that's, because he was a veteran by the time he won the Super Bowl MVP in 96.
Yeah. And so I think one of the first things you notice about this game, Dimitri, let's hammer it now, is the soundtrack itself.
The soundtrack.
It is the first game and the only game in this series that featured a soundtrack that wasn't just football fight songs by a marching band or a Russian military band, as we've learned in an episode recently. It was the first and only one to be able to do that. Even though you could turn that off in the settings, you got what was very much a Madden-like presentation with that, which is Madden licenses music because there's no marching bands in the National Football League. But College football tried that for 1 year. They didn't keep it, but as you've talked about many times on the show, that's something that very much sticks out to you.
Absolutely, because it very much kept in line with the idea of putting Desmond Howard on the cover, because these were not, you talk about a Madden-like presentation in that era, 05, 06, 07, 08, excuse me, I was working in rock radio, and I can tell you for a fact from talking to label reps, it was a big deal to get your new song picked to be on Madden. Also around this time, MVP Baseball had a little bit of a following. So getting your song, and granted, I'm sure that other games had that same market for other genres, but I was working in rock radio. I know what the rock industry was going through at this time. That's not what NCAA did. NCAA kicked it back to like early 90s, late 80s classic college radio jams. Actually, I shouldn't say classic college radio jams. There was one on there, but classic college radio underground-y kind of bands. I mean, Bad Religion, The Clash, Pixies, NoFX, like all of these bands, or a lot of these bands, grew above that level, but that is where they all started. I think the biggest hit on this soundtrack would either have been De La Soul, Me, Myself, and I, or would have been Train in Vain by The Clash. But, I mean, there are some really, really great songs on this soundtrack, and it's not just from that level of bands that broke through. I mean, I worked in college radio for all 4 years. I was in Tuscaloosa. I've been working in radio since I was 15, so I had some familiarity. I still have some familiarity with, I think some bands that like the guy that just tangentially likes music doesn't. So to see bands like Superchunk, to see bands like Guided by Voices show up on this thing, Mother Love Bone, which was the precursor to Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, like it was really cool. Even though I would have been 8, 9, 10 years old and not into this kind of music when it was new, it really did feel like this was a game made for me. I mean, it really did. I think the soundtrack had that much impact to the point that a lot of these songs are still in heavy rotation on my Spotify to this day.
And if I'm not mistaken, one, if not both of your children were conceived to this soundtrack?
Yes. It was, I had hit pause on a game. I was using Pitt, and of course, was playing for the Big East Championship against noted hated rival UConn. When, the mood struck and the romantic strings of More Than Toast by the Mr. T Experience came over the speakers.
You paint such a romantic, pastoral image of like what it's like to
make love to me, Frank.
To make sweet, sweet love to the Greek man himself, Dimitri Ravanos.
That's right.
Of course, in between quarters, right? Like, hey, let me just get to this. We got 34 seconds left. Let me run a couple plays. So, by the way, it also fit with the idea that like this is the kind of music and the way you would listen to the types of music if you were in college, which would be it's more of the some more of the experimental type music that you're probably not used to. Your friends will be playing in your dorm room, so to speak, or you'll hear down the halls of your entire building. Like it sort of fit with the motif. Like for the most part, when I was in college, I didn't hear, even though I'm from a place that loves it much, I didn't hear a lot of like Merle Haggard running down the hall, right? So I heard more of this type of music, more of the outside the fringes that time, even though this was less so by the time it came to the game. Yeah. It was that kind of sort of place that I got put in. Cause again, like I'm in college, right? Just now, like starting to get into this deeply. And it sort of got me into that sort of mind frame for a little bit. I would eventually go to turn it off because I like the tradition of the marching band fight songs because I think that's one of the things that made it different from
Arky. I'll tell you this is true, and this is a divide between you and me in the way we play this game, or I guess what we like about this game. After this version, I have not played the game with the sound on ever since. It would be my own music of what I wanted to listen to until that special day when podcasts came into my life. But I don't like the, I've had arguments about this with our listeners online before. What is the best fight song? I don't know. They're all fucking stupid. Who cares? That's the way I feel about fight songs. And I really do think showing us not just different music, but also the creativity that the producers were able to paint a picture of, what college life was like. And look, let's be fair. What college life was like probably for them, right? It sort of lines up with the time that these guys would have been in college. But it was just such a cool added feature to the game that I think the next 8 versions that we got, like, we suffered for not having it. Like, it made the game worse by showing us what could be and then taking it away.
I don't think we suffered for not having it. I think what suffered is the fact that we didn't get nearly the kind of advancements in the game as we got with this version in later versions. We got tweaks and we got different additions, but we never got sort of the giant overhaul that was to this entire game, like we're going to start talking about now. This is the last game that gave you FCS teams.
That's right.
Back Division 1A, of course, but this is the last game that gave you FCS teams. And in Dynasty Mode, you could start as an FCS coach.
Right.
So this is the last game that you could do that in, and that's a bummer. That's a bummer that's been that long.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You had to take the team up a level, right? Like, you couldn't start with Chattanooga in the SoCon. You had to move Chattanooga into an FBS conference, but you could start with one of those teams.
I believe so, yeah. I believe that you had to bring them up. But, like, you could. And you could schedule them onto your schedule. You could play them in the Play Now mode, that mode. The game, that's where, like, that's the kind of things where I think when you talk about the game suffering, that is where I think the game suffers, is when you lose bits of reality, not when you lose like music. Like, when you college football, I'll say this 1,000 times more before I die, or at least this podcast is over, so start the meter. I think college football is great because it is so different from the NFL.
Sure.
It is so bizarre. I was talking with someone just the other night on Twitter about just how, and he was he's a listener and a viewer of this here show. He sent me a TikTok of someone reminding me of a really bizarre Derek Dooley story. And I just went back and forth with it. I just went back and forth with it, saying there's a bunch of those Derek Dooley stories out there. And you're not getting those in the NFL. You get once every blue moon, like a Rex Ryan foot fetish video, right?
Like, I mean, it is.
But you're not going to get one coach to give you like a dozen different, like, I had to teach the guys how to bathe, kind of thing. Like, we had to listen. Like, it's just bizarre. And that's what's different from college football. It's why it's so good to me.
No, I agree with you. I mean, this is actually, it sort of explains why I can look at college football and like it more than the NFL, just, by my personal taste, and look at college basketball as much as I love the NBA and say, oh, that offers me nothing. Like, college basketball and the NBA are the same game played at different skill levels. College football and the NFL are not the same game. They are very different playbooks. They are very different expectations. Like, I'm with you. Like, the uniqueness of college football is very good. And I think that as this game kept going, and I know, look, we're focused on 06 today, right? But, we started to throw in elements of the spread option. We started to throw in elements of the Wildcat, these things that began at the college level that made it distinctly college. Sure, like, Tony Sperano made the Wildcat a thing that first the Dolphins and then everybody did, but they made it something that the Dolphins and everybody did in the NFL for a play. Right? Like, do you remember in 2009 when it was very clear not only was Alabama going towards the national championship, but Nick Saban would be goddamned if Mark Ingram did not win the Heisman? Do you remember how many times they ran Wildcat against South Carolina just so Ingram could get his like streak of 100-yard games?
Way more than I would have ever expected Nick Saban to have ever accepted that style of offense or that particular play. Yeah, formation. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's you remember how revolutionarily weird that was for the Wildcat to
Yes.
sort of be a
Do
thing?
you remember the first time Tim Tebow jumped before he passed? And we were all like, holy shit, what do we do?
That? It's what's great, but like where you see it first, it's not with the Patriots. The Jets are never running the play first.
Right.
Right.
Football. I mean, like this has been true throughout time. Football innovation trickles up.
Sure. It absolutely does. So Dynasty Mode, which is what the show is called, and what we love the most about this game, got so much more in depth with this game, and added for the first time ever the ability to do in-season recruiting. And Dimitri, as we talked about, that is a game changer for this franchise.
This is what I mean by, even though I don't think this is the best version of this game, I would not be surprised if this is the one that made people fall in love with it, because suddenly you didn't just play games, right? You were investing a literal hour just to get through a week if you played the game.
Yeah. You had to do so much more, and it would turn into more that you have to do later. But the ability just to start targeting players and then trying to make some contact with them, and then even though it's elementary based on what we had in 2014, it's not that far different. We would see ebbs and flows with it later. For me personally, I think 14 is probably the worst version, to be honest with you. But that's a different topic for a different time. But the ability to do that started with this game. This is why the case keeps building for this being the greatest of all time. Not because it was the best at that at the time, but because it would introduce you to a few things, and it would also do things that make you fall in love with the game, especially if you're like Dimitri Ravanos, who fell out of love a little bit from the 05 game, who literally was returning the game for $1.50.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there was certainly, look, before this, obviously you don't have someone like me that genuinely hates the 05 game that still goes out and buys the 06 game the day it comes out, if you have not already built up some version of goodwill. I do think that the 06 version may have created an amount of goodwill or a level of fandom that maybe EA didn't even count on being there for this game, for this franchise, until they kind of unlocked this Pandora's box of everything that was, I'm going to say possible, but maybe more what I mean is everything that was appealing, I guess, or everything that a college football fan could have possibly wanted, everything that to us, because this sort of coincides with ESPNU doing 3 and 4 hour National Signing Day specials, right? Everything that is part of college football to us.
Yeah, because let's not forget, it's still niche now, but being interested in recruiting in like the mid-2000s.
Oh, you had to work.
Oh, man. If you wanted that content,
yep,
it was not just available for everybody just to find with a one click through to the regular website you go to.
That's to give people an idea. So one of my best friends from high school is a guy named Matt Lomax. Matt was he played center when he was at Alabama. I can't remember if he played. I think he played center in high school and ended up playing guard at Alabama. He was a Parade All-American back when Parade was the only publication that did any sort of special designation for great high school football players. He was a Parade All-American, and there was no ranking because all we know is that, like, I don't know. I mean, he's good. They all seem good. Just pick one.
I mean, shit, have you seen him?
Yeah, and now you've got a site like 24/7 that literally issues updates to Instagram the second they change their ratings on somebody. The second someone ascends to the top, to a new spot in their top 4,000 or whatever it is.
You wanted to be a Parade All-American, and then when you got to college, you wanted to be a Playboy All-American.
Absolutely.
And
I bet those two parties were very different.
I think when you got to the pros, you just wanted to be paid cash only. No paper trail here.
Yeah.
Okay, so this game was also the first, when I talk about the innovation that you see from the video game, think about all the games that you loved for this series before. And I did, right? Like I told you, like the first time I first played was the 2001 version, which was back in 2000 that it came out. But I had gone back and I had friends that had the other versions, so I played them all.
Yeah.
The love affair that I had with this game was already strong. When we got broadcasters, that was a big deal. When we got them animated for a pregame show, it happened in this game for the very first time. This is the first time where you got Brad Nessler, Lee Corso, and Kirk Herbstreit animated for a pregame, sort of discussion of your team for 45 seconds, and then Lee Corso putting on your helmet, or your mascot head. That all happened visually on this game for the very first time in 06.
Yeah, I mean, like there are a lot of, like I said, there are a lot of things that I don't think EA as a parent corporation, because I think one of the great things about Tiburon and the what would you call them? The subsidiary studio, I guess, of EA that was responsible for this game is they clearly loved college football. I don't think it was until this game that they were able to convince the bosses that were so disconnected from each individual game's production that, no, this is going to be worth it to our audience. And that's, to your point, Arky, I mean, broadcasters and even something like a pregame presentation. Like if you think about the last game we got, 14, right? You don't ever see Reese Davis and David Pollock, but there is some sort of pregame something. Like that matters to college football fans.
Yeah,
like college
Reese Davis talking about, hey, this is a big time matchup for the Florida Gators. Like you get that, and, you'll be able to get some of the halftime stuff too, where like they'll look over the stats and David Pollock will be like, man, don't know why Georgia can't run for shit right now.
Yeah, I mean, it all started. What I think is interesting about the pregame and the animated scenes in 06 that had nothing to do with your gameplay is it only got smaller from there, right? They went big the first time out of the gate with the headgear pick, with like here are Lee Corso, Kirk Herbstreit, and Brad Nessler. And after that, it was voiceover. It was voiceover to a package of, quote unquote highlights. Maybe you got the Pontiac play where the car would spin out on the 50-yard line.
G6, baby.
That's right.
I think it's a G6. I don't know what it was.
But none of it was as big as the way they came out of the gate with that sort of animated, let's call them extras.
So what I'll tell you that I think about this that is frustrating them. And by the way, Erin Andrews, we should mention, as part of that sort of you don't see or you hear kind of thing. Right. And even with her, as little as you heard, Reese Davis and David Pollock was as little as you're hearing Erin Andrews, even though she was, a part of the game. Usually you hear like at a halftime or something like that. But
you used to hear her a lot more. And then 14 in particular, like you hear her once a game. And I always wondered if that coincided somehow with her move to Fox. I wonder if there was some sort of, deal with ESPN where EA said, look, we're paying her anyway. We've got to do something.
Ice her out.
Right.
and she literally just gets on her phone and records like 7 lines. Like that's all you need. That's it. In fact, I don't know why you read the last 2. We only needed 5.
So I'm glad you said recording lines, because this is not Erin Andrews specific. This is sort of going back to your point about this being the first game with broadcasters attached to the game in this way.
With the anime, like you got audio versions of them a few years before, but never you got the animated open like this.
There are very few versions of this game where the soundtrack of play-by-play doesn't instantly feel tired. And this was one of them as part of a big overhaul. It wasn't the same lines from a few years before. It wasn't even the same guys.
It's clear going forward that there was a lot of repeat. And again, listen, you know what I understand? I understand there's only so many ways you can say 2nd and 10.
Sure.
Like I get that there's not an endless amount. It's just, if you have a year in between recording sessions, jot a few things down.
Well, I mean, it's not
and then add them into the AI a little bit and say, hey, next time we see you, come in and, record 14 to 15 new lines about 1st and 2nd down. So then maybe we can make this thing feel a little fresher.
That is going to be, I think, the most interesting element of where we go in 23, or I guess the 24 game, is like when this game ended, man, we were nowhere near where we are on AI right now, right? Like, to your point, all you had to do was just pay Kirk Herbstreit for an hour to walk into a studio, and Brad Nessler too, to walk into a studio in Bristol and just record some commentary stuff for between downs or after plays. And they didn't even do that. So now that we are going to be working with a level of artificial intelligence that just did not exist before, I think it's a big deal.
I think it's a very big deal too, because I think especially what you're going to get is when this game first comes out, is you're going to get every criticism possible. Everyone's going to pick this thing apart.
Yep.
And because we have much more of what we didn't have in 2013 now, which is everyone's access to the social media element. Everyone
right.
has a chance to have one of these cool YouTube channels. Everyone has a chance to sort of play this game, emulate this game, say what they hate and like about this game. Like, the possibility for bad will to be shown upon this can be so much more evident now than what it was back in 2013 for the 14 game, that it has to be a huge consideration when they're working on the new one.
Just something like Twitch, where you can play it for the first time live and without, really investing time into it, people are going to be reacting and people will be watching those reactions as they happen. Like, I don't know if that's advantageous for NCAA, because I wonder when 06 came out, I wonder how many of us thought immediately, oh, cool, and how many of us felt like, oh, the in-season recruiting, like, that's the best example I can think. What a waste of time. Like, I just want to get to the next game.
Oh, you mean the percentage of people who are like, man, in-season recruiting is awesome versus, man, in-season recruiting? Like,
right away. I think eventually the majority of players came around to in-season recruiting being a cool element to the game. But I do wonder, like, if you had a Twitch-like thing, the first time you crack open 06, let's say you crack it open on July 11th, 2005. How do you feel about it?
I was tickled, but other people probably weren't tickled. Other people were like what you're saying. But again, like, to me, I think the percentage of people that would want a college football game, right, that just want to play as their team, not as a dynasty, just like Alabama versus Texas, Alabama versus Penn State. They just want to play their team, play in all these fantasy stadiums, like, just see Alabama on a different field, blah, blah, blah. I feel like the percentage of those is smaller than the ones who would want to take that team, let's say, for multiple dynasties and experiment with, Big Al as their in mascot mode and want to experiment with different things as opposed to just wanting to get it for just the individual elements like that. But I don't know. We've been surprised by the feedback from some people who have, gotten back in touch with the show to say that, hey, listen, this is what I wanted from that game. Like, I'm not as big of a Dynasty Mode, not the podcast, the mode itself fan, because those people love this podcast. Don't you? Don't you guys love this podcast? Don't you? Please don't you?
This podcast.
I think what's interesting about this game is that there's
good cop, bad cop about the podcast.
I think what's so interesting about this game is that the gameplay was smoother on it.
Absolutely.
The AI was so much more realistic on this game. Like, you didn't have linebackers jumping 45 feet in the air to grab interceptions.
But, Arky, thank God that came back later.
Yes. I don't know who asked for it, but and it's also introduced impact players. You remember impact players?
I do
remember the pulsating white dot underneath the I think you got like 3 players you could have on your team.
Yeah, and
I think one on one side of the ball you could have, but like,
even though I think that they would say like, oh, it could be anybody. Like, I seem to recall almost always one of them was a receiver on your team, because
you couldn't have a lineman.
Oh, yeah, okay. I mean, that makes sense. Like, to me, it just seemed like, look, if you're going to do an impact player thing, certainly anybody on the defense, that looks really good, right? Because the point of the impact player was when they made a big play, things slowed down. You got a real sort of highlight package.
Dude, you got like a wide screen, like the screen with widescreen.
Yeah,
I'm making something fancy happen.
It was as if you got the last dance of LB 34 in real time as he sacked the quarterback. So for defensive players, any of them work, right? But for offensive players, like really, if it's not a receiver or a running back, what are you going to do? Have a slow motion of a quarterback throwing? Have a lineman making an impact block?
Well, I never saw a lineman become an impact player, to be honest with you. I don't know if it was possible in the game, but I never physically saw it when I played.
Were kickers possible? Kickers had to be, right? But punters probably not.
I don't remember. So I distinctly remember you could have up to 3, but not every team had 3, right?
Okay.
Like you could have an offensive player, maybe 2, and a defensive player, but you couldn't have all of them on one side of the ball.
Right.
Because I think at the beginning of the season, you got to choose your impact player.
Interesting.
If you're in Dynasty mode, you could be like, hey, if I happen to have Reggie Bush or something, that's not a bad guy to have for an impact player.
Would they give you, here are your options? Here are the guys that are eligible? Or was it
I think you could just sort of pick, and you weren't going to pick a third string running back.
Why wouldn't you?
He
spends the whole game charging up, and you put him in garbage time, and then every single play is a highlight.
Then those clips you want to save online and start sharing with people, you're like, who's this guy? He's my 4th string offense, my option. He's the guy that never gets to play except for when we're beating the Citadel by 60.
Arky, you don't even mention that. You just say 100% of his plays are impact plays.
Oh, I like that. My fault. Yeah. Then you put that on your Twitch.
That's right.
2023 snaps. You're looking good. You're looking like you know what you're doing in this game.
Damn right you do.
That's right. You know what's also interesting about this game? It's not often, but that you sort of see little things like this. But I saw it noted somewhere else, and I went back and looked at it in the last couple of weeks. The game actually paid attention, and to me, it looked like it made sense. Well, I mean, it makes sense, but it looked like it did do this. That the college players were animated a little skinnier than the Madden players.
Interesting.
Of the 06 game. And it kind of makes sense, right? The NFL is the biggest, baddest of the one, so college is going to be a little bit smaller on average, right?
Yeah.
It kind of made sense, and it's sort of, now that that's in my head, I think even more highly of EA Sports for this game, and why it's partly the GOAT of these games, is because it was the first one that I noticed and that I know of them making a distinction between the two sets of dudes and wasn't just a bunch of polygons on the field.
I mean, it does tell you why, with NCAA 14 and whatever we get going forward, however many games we get going forward, it does tell you why there is that real disdain for the idea and the concern that EA is just going to, for the gameplay, is just going to reskin Madden. Because there were plenty of years where these were 2 totally different productions, and you got, whether it was intentional or not, you got those details that stood out to someone like you.
Yeah, we've been sort of semi-reassured that it's not going to be a reskin of Madden, but again, the fear's still out there, right?
Oh, of course.
I know they're spending the last 2 years on this, but
but they're not spending 2 years on 24 or 25. They're spending 2 years on the 23 version. And so I think
it's the one to buy and then to never buy again.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, I don't know.
So if you remember in 2005,
I do.
Okay, good. That was a good year for you.
Yep.
The version, not in the year 2005, sorry, the 05 version.
Oh, I don't.
You used to be able to have a team builder. Right? Where you used to be able to go online and use the EA servers and sort of build your team. Well, that went away in 06.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, in 06, inside the game itself, they had a team. They had what they call it? They call it Create a School.
Create a School, yeah.
You could create a fan. You could create a sign.
Yep.
Right for the game. And that made the more, probably saved EA a few bucks on servers, but also it gave you the opportunity that inside the game itself to create all those sort of interesting aspects.
Wait, did 05, did you have to do the Create a School online? I feel like Create a School didn't move to an online thing until 10 or 9.
Well, there was a team builder aspect that you could do online, right? Where you sort of, it was a bit of a precursor to like managing your dynasty online.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. Okay. So it's, a little bit. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Did you ever create a school?
Oh yeah, Ravana State.
That you being really cute and quick with the joke, or did you actually
No,
pick a Ravana?
I actually did.
You went through all the time to make a Ravana State?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's so how long would it take you? Because I never did this, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I loved Create a School, and there would be years because in this version, if you created a school and used it in a dynasty, it had to replace another school. So there would be years that I would create Alabama just so I could change up the uniform a little bit. It took a while because Archie, it wasn't just a matter of, oh, I'm creating Ravana State, and let's say I don't remember what my colors were for Ravana State, but let's say I decide that I'm going to make them the Charlotte Hornets of college football, right? Teal and purple.
That's right.
Well, it wasn't just that you picked the logo and said, I want the logo teal and purple. No, you had to pick your primary, secondary, and tertiary color. So you had to play with the logo just the right way to make it come out exactly like you wanted it to. That took some time. Then on top of that, you had to pick your rivals. You had to pick your fight song. You had to design a home and an away jersey. I mean, it was a time investment. It really was. And I loved it. I loved the Create a School. I really did. I had a series of schools that I would make in multiple games. Ravana State was literally a one-time. I distinctly remember we were the Ravana State Stallions. And I cannot tell you what the colors were, unfortunately, but I remember the generic horse logo they had that we used. But I had like this whole series of schools that I knew were real schools, but knew were so small that would never have football, right? Like one of them was the University of D.C., which was a real school. I knew about it from going to visit my then girlfriend, now wife, at Georgetown. But I just wanted to have a school right in the heart of Washington, D.C. And so I couldn't tell you what their logo was. I couldn't tell you where their mascot was, but they were the D.C. Marauders in my game.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, I always sort of saw, and this is just a personal maybe flaw of mine, but just how I see it, I thought Create a School like I was playing, the Doug Flutie football video game.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
Like you're just like creating something that doesn't exist.
I think you have to approach Create a School, especially if you were going to put them in your dynasty, as, well, these all have to be MAC teams. Because is it really so consequential to the game that you lose Akron?
Well, yeah, like I could not imagine seeing your, University of DC team, let's say in the Pac-12.
Right.
Like, it would just be weird to be like, hey, the Pac-12 championship is between USC and the University of DC.
Yep. I mean, no, long-time rivalry. That was my favorite part of this, is you had to pick two rivals. And there was no, like, you pick another Create a School. No, your rival, University of DC's hated rival was Auburn.
It's funny with all the sort of conference realignment that you see is like there's new rivalries having to be sort of thrust upon people.
Yeah.
Right? Like you saw it when like realignment happened in like 92, like for the 92 season. For like
That's
the
right.
SEC,
And everyone in South Carolina was told, you hate the people of Arkansas now.
Yeah. And you're like, huh? Like, yeah, big time. You hate them.
I always have wondered, thinking back to that, when, it was so important to the SEC to protect Alabama and Tennessee and Auburn and Georgia. I really would love to see like the conversation of, all right, Ole Miss, you know how you hate Vanderbilt, right?
Like, hey, yeah, what?
Huh?
Yeah. The freaking Nashville guys, huh? With their degrees and stuff, using their GPA on you. Get after them.
Yeah.
I got nothing to say about them. Make it up. You got time.
I guess geographically it does make sense, right? You have people moving down from the north to Nashville versus white flight from Memphis.
I don't want to just let that sit. I want people to marinate on it because that's solid.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I'm not afraid of it.
I was afraid you were letting it sit to like let me sit in my shame for a moment.
No, I approve of it.
Oh,
I
good.
approve of it.
Good.
I just want people to be able to not move on to our final topic
Okay.
just long enough to be able to realize what you said. Hilarious.
Is accurate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hilarious and accurate.
Yeah.
Yes. Which I think is what Fox News' mantra is, right?
That's right.
To be fair, it's all news, right? All news is like, this is hilarious and it's totally accurate. Okay, so the final thing I want to talk about with you,
Go
Mr.
on.
Dimitri Romanos. Save the best for last, the entree of this plate.
Okay.
Race for the Heisman.
Oh, Arky, this was
the only year we got this version of this.
I was about to say,
it would turn into Campus Legend.
Campus Legend is
But this
fine.
year we got Race for the Heisman, and man, there's a lot to like about that.
I got to tell you, Arky, one of the things about... So I've never been a Campus Legend Race for the Heisman guy, and part of the reason is, like, you had to really buy into this mode. Like, you could not, like,
you got to completely escape reality.
Yeah, like, you couldn't casually stumble upon the idea of, I want to experience this game in a new way. No, brother, this was your life.
Yeah, exactly. Because what was beautiful about Race for the Heisman is, first of all, the way you start, which is you do like a drill or two. Maybe it was 3. I don't know. Maybe it was just, I think it actually was just one drill at the beginning.
I think every position had one drill.
Yeah. And then once you chose your position and then your drill showed up, you got 3 scholarship offers.
Right.
And usually you'd be like, hey, number 3 Iowa wants you. And you're like, huh? You're like, number 19, Virginia Tech wants you. Like, what? And Buffalo wants you.
That's right.
And so you would either choose one of the 3 options or choose your school that you would, quote unquote, walk on at. You could earn your way through practice, I guess, to get there. But the premise at the very beginning is so insanely flawed that you completely have to get rid of reality. And that's why I love it. It's like, hey, these guys saw me do one drill at one camp, and now the best and the worst teams want me. But I also can just choose anywhere that I want to go.
So for people that like to sort of tell you where this thing went, NCAA 14 Campus Legend, you play an entire high school season before it's time to choose. And along the way, as you put up better stats, as you accumulate more consistency, your offers get better and better. This version, I mean, it's almost like it is so far removed from what the rest of this game is. I mean this as a compliment. It was so far removed from what the rest of this game is. This was almost like The Sims with an actual football game in the middle of it.
It's kind of fair, right? Because then you would go back into your dorm room.
Yep.
And
with your corkboard.
There's so much I love about the dorm room. First of all, the idea that as you go, you just go from a trash dorm room to a really good dorm room. Right? You just gradually get better. And you're like, hey, isn't that how it normally works? No, the freshmen get good dorm rooms as well as the seniors get good dorm rooms. Okay. And usually at these major programs, it's separated from everybody else on campus. Like that. But anyway, we're escaping reality for a bit, right? Like you got to earn your way to be able to have, sheets and blankets for your bed. But like you would have like a section like a fan mail, right? You'd have fan mail where you'd go read your fan mail and it'd be like, hey, Dimitri, you're really starting to get the Oklahoma spirit in you. I really like to see that. You're starting to make some big time plays for us, Boomer Sooner. What the hell is this? This is, I could confirm this was on there. As a senior, if you were a starter and you were, I don't know when this would show up, but like you had to attain a certain level of celebrity and achievement and all that kind of stuff. You would get fan mail telling you babies had been named after you. Yes. You'd be like, wow, this is a weird thing to send a 19-year-old. I like that.
That's right.
There was obviously a newsletter section where you could
Yep.
sort of read like how your team did, which I'm guessing you knew how a team, but you want to see how people, are writing about it. So to speak.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of evolves into the ESPN, the magazine / Sports Illustrated covers that come up later on in the game.
Of course, you had I think the last 2 things I want to talk about with this, and I want to play a quick game with you.
Yeah.
You had a trophy case.
Okay.
and your trophy case was literally
like, was this like the way the trophy case is towards the end of the game's lifespan, where it's like, hey, you get to take the Orange Bowl trophy home. Hang on to that for us.
Yeah, the trophy case was like one of those packing trunks.
Yeah,
like that you see.
Yeah,
like
it's a case. It's an actual case.
It's a case that I guess you could transport a trophy in. But I assume that as a junior in college, you have other stuff in there.
Also, as a junior in college in 2005, you certainly own a steamer trunk that came over on the Titanic.
Oh, you definitely do. Like, those were big when I was in college. Like, a lot of steamer trunks, mainly filled with nudie mags, were in that. But again, you don't want your roommates to know all about it, right?
No, you would hire a young Irish boy to bring it in for you.
Never saw a roommate, by the way. Never saw. Like, everyone just got their own dorm, but that's fine. And my favorite part of Race for the Heisman wasn't the fact that you could win the Heisman, or the fact that in this game you could export your team to Madden.
Yeah.
Now you could export your Heisman winner.
Yep.
Hopefully you were good enough to win to Madden. My favorite part was that as you got better, the girlfriend that you would have a photo of on your bulletin board definitely got hotter.
This is EA Sports telling you that they know college kids fuck.
That's right. This thing slaps and these kids fuck. Because it was just the assumption that you would just move on from your girlfriend, like from freshman to sophomore year, and you're like, listen, Becky ain't doing it for me. Look at Veronica. Woo.
EA, I think Archie Shea just gave you the new slogan for this game. This game slaps, and these kids fuck.
No charge. I don't even want a free copy. I just want acknowledgement. That's all.
That's right.
Just tweet at me when the game comes out. But I think it was so stereotypical that, like, the first girlfriend you would get have like this giant headgear.
Yes.
For like braces. And you're like,
because you know how when you're a hot recruit coming into campus, no girl will look at you.
Not one. Not a single one would look at you. And you're lucky to find that girl at the library, to be honest with you. Like, she's probably just minding her.
At the library, you probably met her on the team visit to the hospital.
That's right. We had a charitable visit, by the way. That it has to be returned that way, right? Like, I don't care. Like,
it is so, like, I don't think we will ever forget this game. I don't think we will ever see a game associated with a brand, whether it is the NFL, whether it is college football brands that license their names to EA, or even whether it is a game that has advertising in it, like a Metal Gear or something like that, right? I don't think we will ever see a game that involves advertising that will just openly lean into counterculture. Is such a strong word for this, but it is so anti what it is that it's so anti the mystique that college football had been trying to sell about itself. There is so much about this game that was like a tip of the hat wink, a wink, a nod, or whatever, that we get it. Like, we understand that college football happens in the real world.
We understand that even these video game characters can have hormones.
Right. Even these video game characters gots to get theirs.
They do. Final thing I want to do with you, I have for here, real quick, the top 25 toughest places to play.
Ooh. In
2006's video game, the 06 game. So I don't want you to guess all 25. I'm going to give you 10 guesses. And I want to see how many of the top ones that you can get. All right?
I am confident number one was the Swamp.
You think it was the Swamp? You're correct. Ben Hill Griffin Stadium in Florida is number one.
I couldn't even begin. Is number two the Horseshoe?
That is number 4. Ohio Stadium is number 4 for Ohio State.
Okay. I don't think it was top 3, but I know Neyland was pretty high.
Neyland was number 3.
Oh, okay.
On the list. So you're right. It was not top 3. It was 3.
You're right.
Remember, we're talking about the year 2005
I know,
when this comes out. That's what's so fun about this.
Is number 2 Michigan?
Michigan is number 10.
Number 10. So then is number 2 Florida State?
Number 2, Doak Campbell is number 11.
All right. I know Bryant Denny was in there, but I know it was not top 10.
Bryant Denny is number 19. You have 4 more guesses.
Well, 06. Okay. So could it have been LSU?
LSU is number 6, Tiger Stadium.
Wow.
One of the 7 or 8 Death Valleys that are out there.
That's right. That's right. Man, I want to try and get more higher ones, but also I'm curious as what else is on the list. Is Autzen Stadium on there?
Autzen Stadium's number 15. You got 2 more
15?
guesses.
Okay, Blacksburg has to be on there. If this is 06, Blacksburg has to be on there.
Virginia Tech Stadium, Lane Stadium is number 5.
Yeah, I know.
One last guess. You're missing number 2, 7, 8, and 9 as far as the top 10 are concerned.
Oh, Happy Valley has to be in there.
Happy Valley is Penn State, and that is... Where am I missing you guys at?
So it's definitely not number 2.
17. They call it Beaver Stadium,
Really?
I guess, at the time. Okay.
Oh, okay. So Oklahoma.
All right, you want a
has to be
bonus
on
guess?
here.
Is that what you're trying to do to me here?
No. I know these don't count. I'm saying like those other 3 in the top 10 that I didn't have. There's 3 in the top 10, right?
You missed 4.
4 in the top 10. All right, Texas has to be in there.
Texas is not in the top 25.
Oh, good. That's the way it should be, but I thought they might be. Oklahoma?
Oklahoma is Memorial State. It's a Gaylord Memorial. Gaylord, Oklahoma Memorial, which is number 12. Let me just give it to you, all right?
Yeah, go ahead, give it to me.
And we can wrap this bad boy up and get you ready for another podcast.
Pew, pew.
Number 25 is Martin Stadium in Washington State. Pullman's love. 24 is the Carrier Dome in Syracuse. 23 is Washington's Husky
Stadium. Said 25 was Washington State, not 2. That's why I was confused.
Oh, I'm building the suspense.
Yeah. No, I like it.
Number 22 is, of course, Miami's stadium, which is known for, I guess, people at one point being in it. 21 was, you got to go to Manhattan, Kansas to check out Kansas State Stadium. Number 20 is Clemson Memorial for Clemson. Number 18, 19 is Bryant Denny. 18 is Mountaineer Field for West Virginia. 17 is Beaver for Penn State. 16 is Notre Dame Stadium.
Okay.
15 is Oregon's Autzen Stadium. 14 is Wisconsin's Camp Randall. 13 is Jordan Hare for Auburn. 12 is Gaylord, Oklahoma for Oklahoma. 11 is Doak Campbell. 10, you got it, is Michigan. Number 9 was Nebraska's Memorial Stadium. Number 8 is Sanford Stadium for Georgia.
Georgia, yeah.
7 is Kinnick Stadium for Iowa.
Really?
6 was LSU. 5 is Virginia Tech's Lane Stadium. 4 is Ohio State. 3 is Neyland Stadium.
Okay, so number 2.
You think you can get it now?
Oh, man. I don't... Is it the Rose Bowl?
2 is Kyle Field.
Oh, of course. It's Kyle Field. Yeah, that's...
They got a whole extra man out of it.
I mean, but really, Archie, let's think about this. How big is Kyle Field?
Then or now? Now it's well over 100. But
and they only got one extra man out of it. How impressive is that?
Sure, like shouldn't like a Michigan Stadium have like 13 or 14 by now? Like if it's that intimidating, right?
Listen, I dismiss the idea that the Seahawks have any claim to the 12th man as much as any college football fan does. But if you're only getting one extra dude, getting it out of a 70,000 seat stadium is more impressive than out of a 100,000 plus seat stadium.
It's that concentrate. It's the orange juice concentrate, right?
That's,
like it's just
right.
Someone's using their flavor more effectively than others.
But hey, A&M, no one can ever take away your fake military and fun male cheerleaders.
They can't either. And they can't take away the fact that you had Johnny Manziel for one really good year and one very underwhelming year.
Yeah. What is their hand sign? Is it like, do they just do the finger guns?
Dimitri. It's thumbs up.
That's it?
Gig 'em.
A&M is a stupid cult. it's just the dumbest culture on the planet.
Giggy. Gig 'em. All right, Dimitri, that's going to do it for us on episode number 17 of this here podcast, paying homage and love to the great NCAA 06. I would like for you to say something nice to the good people to get them out of here.
I bet A&M ladies will give it up for the dude that takes care of that dog. Saving some to next week, everybody.